which is sound in the case of it's words for language, and it's tones for music. Okay? That's different. But the structural combination, the system in your head, the computer in your head, the combination system is identical. Identical. So that when you make a sentence out of phrases, out of words in language, and this is not based on any experiments, this is based on purely on theoretical stuff, but they say in all other respects language and music are identical. This is the sort of most radical position. Okay? Which I won't really talk about, but if you're interested, you can find this work on the internet easily and read about it. It's a pretty interesting case. And then there's this guy, but more important for today, the sort of last thing to think about for today is this guy, Patel. Patel wrote a book called, Language and Music in the Mind, in 2008. And he said, look, domains means modules, right? So the two domains, language and music, have distinct, specific representations, like acorde versus slow, right? But this is his main point. But they share the resources. So inside your mind, your brain, the neurological resources for combined, like you have separate, so this is, do you see that this is not modular anymore? It's not entirely modular. It's not the same as Fodor, who said each module has its own input, its own levels, its own output, and they're separate. And then the music one is separate. They have some similarities, but they're separate. They have separate problems in the brain, all of that. No, Patel says, no, they have the same, they have different blocks, different pieces, but then they kind of go into one general system, which creates, uses it. Now, why does he think that? So it's called shared resources. So this is, when you have your own scientific theory, never call it this, because it's too long and nobody can remember it. The abbreviation is too long. But here's what's important. Shared resources. That is, your mind, it has one general system is acting on music and language in the same way. It's the same resources. Now, why does he think that? So that's an anti-modular position. This is where people throw tomatoes at each other at conferences. Okay? The anti-modular people sit in that side, and the modular people sit in that side. Those people have tomatoes. Those people have grapefruits. More powerful weapons. Right? Why does he think this? He thinks this because of a guy called Koch. Koch. How are we doing for time? I'm almost done, actually. Talk too much. But that's okay. We think this because of a guy called Koch and his colleagues in Germany, I think, Stefan Koch, who have done experiments. Okay? And these experiments are trying to test whether or not the resources for musical organization and linguistic organization are the same. Now, how do they do that? I didn't put the thing. All right, well, I'll explain how they do that. This is what they do. They put you in one of those ERP, EEG things, like a thing that measures the brain activity through your scalp, right? It's a well-known method in psychology for testing brain reactions. It doesn't hurt. It's not torture. It's very nice, actually. It's soothing. Laboratory setting. And then it's very well known. They take a sentence and they give you a sentence of your language, and they say, John and his friends is stupid. And is wrong, it should be are, it's singular instead of plural, so it's a grammatical mistake. And then they look at what happens to your brain waves when you hit the grammatical mistake. And what happens is, one part of your mind for syntactic grammatical problems lights up. And it's activity. It's an electric response. And that's what they're measuring. I don't do these experiments myself, but a colleague of mine at Stony Brook does these experiments. Okay? And that's well known, that a certain kind of response happens if you have a syntactic mistake. Okay. Then they put a musical progression, and they say, you know, Mozart, 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 everything sounds good, and then the wrong chord, or the wrong note. So a musical syntactic mistake. And when they hit that mistake, you get some kind of brain reaction. It's not the same because music is organized in a different hemisphere, Polshadr, right, than language for the most part. So it's in a slightly different location, but it's the same effect. Okay? That's well known. Kolsch comes along and says, let's do them both at the same time. So now you see on the screen words, word, 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 and you're hearing music, 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 right? And then at the same time, you get the wrong word and the wrong note. Now, if the systems were entirely separate, you would expect to see both effects. The same strength. One for music, one for language. But you don't see both. You see less. They're not additive. They're not cumulative. You see less than the two separate pieces combined. That's all. That is the evidence from Kolsch that the resources are shared. So that when there's a mistake in both music and language at the same time, it's not as big a problem as two separate mistakes. Okay. And Patel took that and wrote a book about it. Pretty good book. So, but it turns out that things are not so simple. And this kind of research with these brain things is very new. And it's not very well understood. And I think it's very interesting that, so John Drury in my department at Stony Brook has an experimental lab where doing these same techniques. And they've also looked at combining language and music and also mathematical logic, like you give them this, like 2 plus 2 is 5. What happens when you do that? When you show that, what kind of brain reaction happens there? And also he's talking about visual narrative, which is really interesting, like comics. The structure of comics. You know, and you expect after these frames, you expect some kind of resolution or something like that. And he is also, this is called multimodal experiments, where you're talking about language, your language and music and all these things at the same time. And he thinks that, so this is where modularity is the question. How separate are the systems? And Drury's results seem to show, and I don't have time to tell you the details, but if you're interested, I can send you the articles, and so you can read about it. Drury's results contradict Kolsch's results. And Drury's results seem to show that the modules are very separate. And that the effect, there's an explanation for what Kolsch found. It's a methodological problem, and it's not really evidence for shared resources. So the good guys think that modularity is okay, and that the systems are very separate. And then there's a question of evolution. Do they come from the same source, music and language, in the history of, in the evolution of humans? Or do they come from different sources? And there's some controversy about that. Nobody knows. Nobody has any idea. Anybody who thinks that they understand the evolution of language has no idea what they're talking about. Oh, except we have a lecturer coming, I told you, who wrote 3 books about it. It doesn't mean he understands it, right? It means he has some interesting ideas. There are some very interesting people writing about evolution of mind, especially a guy also from the UK called Stephen Mithen, who thinks the Neanderthals, you know, the other species that died out, they died out because they had more music and less language. That's his theory. Because music doesn't help you win a war, right? You can't make a plan. Like with language, I can make a plan. So you go over there, you go over there, and then... But with music, you can't do that. It doesn't help you survive. Or maybe it does. I don't know. But anyway, so these are you know, this is, so Drury's, these are the different effects that you get on the brain, and he has a completely different idea called minimal cognitive model of how these things are organized, and that they're not about syntax and semantics, they're about integration and different kinds of processes, and he has an explanation for why Kolsch finds the kind of result that he has, which do not say that the modules are sharing resources. So the modules are separate. So we're back to Fodor and separate modules, which I think is satisfying because of all the other evidence for modularity. The brain impairments, the children's acquisition, the ability to do language and music at the same time, and so on. So now what I'm going to do is skip this because there's all these things that are obviously different, like words. There's no words in music. There's no notes in language. And so I'll just go to the Zaključenje, which is, you can read for yourself. They are distinct systems with their own architecture and probably their own evolution. And a strong version of Fodor's modularity is okay. Okay? Now, you can see where the action is if you do this kind of, if you're interested in this kind of work. You can study the language module in detail, experimentally or theoretically, or both. You can study the language, the music module in detail, experimentally or theoretically, and you can study their connection. So there's a lot of, and of course there's vision and concepts and all the other things. But cognitive science is interested in these large, what I call questions of architecture. Mental architecture. Right? That's what cognitive science is interested in. And we don't know anything about it, really. This is the very, very beginning of work in this area. So if you're interested in a field that is going to be big in the future, it's cognitive science. The end. Thank you. But we can play some music or have a discussion or both. Whatever you want to do. Questions? Commentary? Musical requests? There's no piano. I would sing you a couple songs. No? No questions?
What about for harmonica?
What?
Harmonica.
Harmonica? Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I can't play harmonica. No. Sorry. Any comments? Questions? Anything? They have nothing to say. I don't believe it. All right, well, then I'll put on music. Oh, and also, if you're interested in our summer school, you can look at this on the way out. Yeah, of course. All right, well, you like that one? You can get that one again.